On Valentine's Day 1981, a 12-year-old boy named Todd Domboski was crossing a backyard in a small Pennsylvania town when the ground opened underneath him. He dropped into a hole 4 feet wide and 150 feet deep, hot mud, a smell of sulfur rising out of the dark. He grabbed a tree root and held on, and his older cousin pulled him out by the arm. Later, someone lowered an instrument into that hole. The carbon monoxide coming out of it was strong enough to kill a person in minutes. Todd had nearly fallen into a fire burning right then under his town. A fire that had already been burning for almost 19 years, a fire that is still burning today. This is Koldshelf, true stories that sound impossible until you look at the documents. If you like history this real, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. This is the story of Centralia, Pennsylvania, a town that set its own dump on fire and then watched the fire go underground, where it could not be reached, could not be drowned, and could not be put out.
Centralia was an anthracite coal town. At its peak, it had more than 2,000 people, 7 churches, and a maze of mine tunnels running for miles beneath the streets.
By 1962, the big mines had closed. What was left underground was a honeycomb of abandoned tunnels and coal seams, all connected, all full of air, and almost none of it sealed. And on the edge of town, in an old strip mine pit, was the town dump. 2 days before Memorial Day, the borough ordered the dump cleaned up. Workers set the trash on fire to burn it down before the holiday, then hosed it out on the surface. But somewhere in the floor of that pit was an opening into the old mine workings, and the fire found it. It slipped down, out of the trash, into the coal seam below, and into the tunnels under the town. On the surface, the dump looked out. Underneath, the fire had only just begun.
By that summer, an inspector found the dump still smoking. The fire was no longer in the trash. It was in the coal.
And here is the thing about this coal. Anthracite is the hardest, cleanest burning coal there is. Once a seam of it catches, the fire creeps along the seam itself, feeding on the coal, pulling in air through every crack and every old tunnel. You cannot just pour water on it. The fire was hundreds of feet down, spread across acres, moving through solid rock and open tunnels at the same time. So the question became, how do you put out a fire you cannot reach? They tried. They dug trenches to cut it off. They pumped wet rock and slurry into the tunnels to smother it. They sealed the surface to starve it of air. Every time the fire was already deeper or wider or further along than they thought, every attempt ran out of money before it caught the fire. Meanwhile, the town was starting to feel it. Gas seeped up through people's floors. The mayor measured the gasoline in his station's underground tanks at 172 degrees, and the tanks were shut down for good. And then, on Valentine's Day 1981, the ground opened under Todd Domboski. The photograph of a boy at the edge of a smoking hole broke Centralia into the national news. Suddenly, the country knew there was a town sitting on top of a fire. 2 years later came the report that ended the argument. Engineers laid out what it would actually take to dig the fire out, a trench that would have torn the town in half at a cost of around $660 million, with no guarantee it would even work. So the government did the math. Instead of spending hundreds of millions to maybe save the town, it would spend far less to move the town away from the fire. In 1983, the residents voted, by a wide margin, to take relocation rather than keep fighting. The next year, Congress put up about $42 million to buy people out and move them. Over the next several years, more than 500 buildings were bought and torn down. Street by street, Centralia came apart. Where there had been homes, there were now empty lots, front steps leading to nothing, and curbs along streets with no houses on them. But not everyone left. A small group refused. Some didn't believe the fire threatened their part of town, and some just wouldn't give up the homes they were born in. So in 1992, the state took the remaining properties by force of law. The people living in them were, on paper, occupying houses they no longer owned. They fought it in court and lost, and the town kept disappearing. The largest church was torn down. The post office closed. Then, in 2002, the Postal Service revoked the town's zip code. On the map of the mail, Centralia no longer existed. It finally ended not with force, but with a deal. The last residents were allowed to stay in their homes for the rest of their lives. When they died, the houses would pass to the state and come down. By the census of 2020, Centralia had 5 residents, the least populated town in all of Pennsylvania, a place that still legally exists with almost no one living in it.
There is one strange afterlife to all this. When the makers of the 2006 film Silent Hill needed a town poisoned by a fire burning beneath it with smoke rising out of the ground, they pointed to Centralia.
And under all of it, the fire is still going. It burns today across hundreds of acres, hundreds of feet down. In some boreholes, the temperature has been measured at more than 1,000 degrees, and it still moves slowly through the tunnels. There is no plan to put it out. There is no method that would work for a price anyone will pay. So it is simply left to burn. The coal it feeds on runs deep enough that, by the best estimates, this fire could keep burning for another 250 years. Town set fire to its garbage one afternoon before a holiday. The fire went underground where no one could follow it. And more than 60 years later, the people are gone, the houses are gone, the zip code is gone, but the fire is still down there in the dark with 2.5 centuries of fuel still ahead of it. If you made it this far, drop a like. It is the smallest thing you can do, and it is the reason the next one gets made.